All right, mathletes. So in looking over the overview for the trimester, I've been looking for opportunities to combine some things, and so I thought this was a good opportunity. I think these are two review items that you've seen from Algebra 1, and I think they're pretty related. So we're going to combine these together and see how it flows. All right, so a little vocabulary here. An open sentence in math. A lot of people say math is a language, and so we talked about expressions versus equations. So here we're getting into equations more. So an expression is more like a phrase in English, right? So an expression is like a mathematical phrase, whereas an equation is a sentence. Okay. So and you can have an open sentence or a closed sentence. A closed sentence would be like 2 plus 3 equals 5, right? Can't do anything with that. That's kind of set. All you can really say about it is whether it's true or false. Like 2 plus 3 equals 5, that would be true. It's a closed sentence, so there's no room for unknowns or variables or things. Um, Also, if you said 2 plus 2 equals 5, that would also be a closed sentence, and the value for that would be false, right? So a closed sentence where you have no variables, and really all you can say about it is whether it's true or whether it's false. Okay. An open sentence, on the other hand, is a mathematical sentence where you have one or more variables, and so it's open in that you can find a value for the variable or plug a value in for the variable. Then you can say whether it's true or false. Once it's closed. All right. An equation, and don't worry about that too much if that doesn't make sense. So this is terminology that we may or may not use from time to time, but just kind of to let you know. So an equation is a mathematical sentence stating that two mathematical expressions are equal, right? So remember we talked about an equation has an equal sign in it, right? You can see the word equal is almost part of the word equation, just missing the L there. And so an equation is where you have two expressions equal to one another, all right? A solution is a replacement for the variable in an open sentence. So if you have an open sentence with a variable, the solution is a situation where you plug in a value for that variable that makes it a true sentence. Okay, so a replacement for the variable in an open sentence that results in a true sentence. All right, here we have a table of properties of equality. Now this is actually from a different textbook, one I used last year for a different class, but in our book covers these four right here. Okay, but I wanted to just put this up here, just a little more comprehensive and complete. We do have these properties of equality too, and basically those properties say, you know, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. They just say you can do whatever you want to an equation as long as you do the same thing to both sides, right? So addition property says you can add the same thing to both sides of an equation, and that keeps the same value, right? So keeps it true. The same thing with subtraction. You can subtract the same value from both sides and still keep the integrity of the equation. Multiplication says you can multiply by the same thing on both sides, right? If you start with these equations, so far we can add, subtract, multiply, and then now with the division property, we can divide the same thing on both sides, and that keeps the same value of the equation, okay? So I just wanted to point those out, and you've probably seen that before, but basically the nice thing about an equation is it's balanced, right? It's equal on both sides, and so as long as you operate the same way on both sides, you can keep that balance intact, okay? Now, one thing with the division property is we can't divide by zero, right? So whatever we're dividing by cannot be zero, because when you divide by zero, what happens? Yeah, the universe explodes, right? Don't try it. All right, so anyway, now with these ones here, these are the ones that we have in the book. The reflexive property, basically, it's kind of obvious. Just says anything is equal to itself, right? Um, so that's what that one says. The symmetric property of equality says that you can flip an equation around, right? So if you say A equals B, if that's true, then B also equals A, right? So in other words, if I say 2 plus 3 equals 5, then I can also flip that around and say 5 equals 2 plus 3. All right. The transitive property of equality says that if A equals B and B equals C, then that means A must equal C, right? So if two things, or if let me put it this way, if one thing equals two different things, then those two different things must be equal as well. Okay. So I kind of call that the domino effect, or that's the way I kind of think of it. All right, and then the substitution property, last but not least. So here, if we know that two things are equal, if A equals B, then that means I can substitute B anytime I see A. So anytime there's an A in an equation, I can put B in there in its place. Okay, and that's something that comes in handy quite a bit. So, and I think you've seen all these and experienced all these things before. You may or may not remember them by name or have known them by name, but I would bet that you utilized all these at some point or another.